Happy Tuesday, everyone. It's so good to see you all. Welcome. My name's Tyler. I'm stewarding this lovely community of practice that you all are integral members of just by showing up here. And if this is your first time here, huge welcome. We're so excited to have you here. This is just one taste of what we do as a community, sharing resources, sharing knowledge. But I do want to point us to the purpose of what we hold for this community of practice. And I'm putting it there in the chat, which is to cultivate and support a community of practitioners who are designing, capitalizing, implementing, and evolving bioregional financing facilities through peer-to-peer learning and coordination. And I think this call today is a lovely example of that peer-to-peer learning and coordination where we had probably 5 or 6 people, I think four of whom or five of whom you'll hear from today, work together on thinking through this database, thinking through how we could best strategize to get resources in the hands of regenerators. And if you're unfamiliar with our community of practice, we have an online group where there's, as of today, 436 people chatting, sharing resources, telling about their projects, telling about their efforts to build bioregional financing facilities. So you can take a look there at that chat and join the link. So normally we do some breakout rooms and some socializing on some of the other calls, and we actually have one tomorrow, which is a great chance to meet folks. We'll be hearing from groups in the Argentinian Andes about their work to regenerate that bioregion and how they're thinking about financing that work. But today, we just wanted to make this kind of straight and to the point and try to serve those who could make use of this wonderful resource that we've been so thankful to have Carla Lopez and Mia Diawara working on, and we've got Josie Watson here and Aria McLaughlin. I hope I pronounced that correctly, Aria. Let me know if not. And we're gonna have, yeah, a good discussion about what is this database, how to make the most use of it, and then also, given the light of the Trump election, what does that mean for these funds and their availability? Um, so I think that's all I'm gonna do this part of the show. We'll have question and answers, and I'll help moderate that later. But I think I want to turn it over to you, Sam.
Yeah, really excited to hear from Mia and Carla today and have them just walk us through the database, the grants that they found that are included there, the criteria that they used in their assessment of what are the most appropriate grants to fund bioregional organizing and activation, and eventually the capitalization of bioregional financing facilities and the different criteria that they've included in this database that can help bioregional organizing teams sort through which are the grants that are really worth spending their time on applying to. And then, yeah, as Tyler said, really happy to have two friends of mine and of the community of practice here, Aria and Josie, to share a little bit about their kind of thoughts and feelings on how things might be shifting with the Trump administration taking power. Both of them have been following the federal grants space, with different areas of focus for quite a long time. And then we'll have some time for Q&A and discussion. And I want to say, like right at the start, that when we posted this database in the community of practice on Hilo and shared it on LinkedIn, and we'll be continuing to share it, we requested that as bioregional organizing teams are applying for these grants and going through the process, that they let us know so we can learn and we can update the database along the way and we can figure out which ones see bioregional work as aligned with the mandate of the grant program and where we can be better storytellers around that to get this money that, I hear from plenty of folks in the federal government. They want to see it flowing to community implemented regeneration projects. And, there are different lenses that these grants take. A lot of them are focused on kind of climate resilience and climate adaptation. But truly it's all the same work that needs to be funded, right? It's strengthening the resilience and connectivity of our communities and the health of our ecosystems. So with that, I will hand it over to the amazing BioFi team members who have been leading this effort, Mia and Carla.
Wonderful. Thank you. And I just sent okay. request to share my screen. I'm going to go ahead and sh start sharing. So, hi everyone. My name is Mia, and along with Carla, um, I have been one of the leaders making this database a reality. And I'm going to spend some time today walking through the database, the purpose of which is to provide the BioFi community of practice with leads on resources and connections to fund bioregional organizing, activation, and ultimately help capitalize bioregional financing facilities. This resource draws from grants.gov, which is an online resource maintained by the Office of Management and Budget, the US government, as well as the Department of Health and Human Services. And it's currently kind of a point in time resource. So the version that is live right now reflects opportunities that were available as of this summer. And the goal is to update this in the very near future to reflect a more current set of opportunities. And then ideally for this to be a more living and dynamic resource in the future that's updated more regularly. That's kind of what we're hoping to build toward. And so today we'll spend some time talking about how this resource was compiled and what it reflects, some notes on usability, and then some updates that are on the horizon that folks can look forward to. So we'll get into it. All right. Can everyone see my screen? Wonderful. So we'll start talking a little bit on the compilation methodology before we dive into the actual table. So as I mentioned, the source data for this was grants.gov. It's the primary resource that organizations can use for finding and also applying to federal funding opportunities. It includes a range of federal agencies as well as cross-agency opportunities, and has on the website pretty detailed information regarding things like eligibility, funding amounts, requirements, as well as a portal to actually go through the application process. For this iteration of the database, there were about 3,000 posted or forecasted funding opportunities that were assessed for inclusion. And again, that was as of this summer. We filtered that data set to yield 700 unique results, which were then manually assessed for relevance. And then a subset of that was further assessed based on thematic alignment for inclusion in the database. And then we filtered again to just make sure that everything was still open, and to try to fill in some information gaps. We applied a few filters to get down to what we thought was the range or the set of most relevant opportunities. So the first was just in the search keywords that were used to source relevant opportunities from the universe of grants.gov. We used about 65 keywords that were including some translation across and bridge building across the terms that I think we use in this work and the terms that might be more familiar to various agencies of the US federal government, but to try to identify opportunities that were thematically aligned. We included a wide range of departments and agencies, with some exclusions that were made early on, just based on some sense checks, some sampling of relevance of opportunities for those particular agencies. One of the things I'll talk about is as we look ahead to this next iteration, we have actually widened the funnel, top of the funnel with regard to the agencies a little bit. And so that pulls from a slightly wider set of departments. But namely NASA and Department of Defense, for example, as well as agencies that were focused on work outside of the United States for now were excluded originally from this iteration. And then eligibility, we kept pretty wide, but excluded county governments, private institutions of higher education, state governments, basically entities that we thought would be less likely to be kind of hubs for bioregional organizing work. And then lastly, these are, as I mentioned, forecasted and posted, which is to say opportunities that had not been closed at the time of compiling this. And then it's called the grants.gov, but the funding instruments actually include grants as well as other structures of funding. So cooperative agreements, procurement contracts, and things that are maybe mixtures of those sets. And so this includes kind of a broader set of funding levers. And so walking through the database itself, I wanted to give a couple of notes on usability first. So you'll see here of a data set it has currently 38 entries and a number of columns. And the first thing for those who are maybe less familiar with Notion to know is that there's a very easy way to scroll across and see all of the columns. If you just press Shift and scroll, it becomes a lot easier to navigate. And so you can kind of scroll up and down and side to side. And there are a range of fields here. But one of the things that is, I think, really useful is that each of these entries is also its own individual page. And so if you were just scrolling through, looking based on the title of the funding opportunity, for example, maybe looking at the opportunity overview, which provides a high-level description of what this opportunity covers. If you came across something that looked relevant, you can open that. It'll open into its own page where you then can read the detailed description and see all of the relevant fields all in one view. So I think that's a useful way to use this resource because I know having all of the opportunities up at once can be a little overwhelming. I'll talk briefly through the different fields here, and in a moment, I'm going to hand over to Carla to speak specifically to some that we think are going to be particularly useful as folks in the community of practice are thinking about relevance to their work. But essentially, you have the title of the funding opportunity, and again, that's the field from which you can click into the full page view. It's classified by the type of funding instrument. So as I mentioned, there are grants, but then also some other funding instruments that are included in the database. And so you can see what is included there. Some have are classified as multiple funding instruments, and so can either have multiple components or some flexibility in terms of how funds are allocated. There is the bioregional intervention, and Carla will speak a little bit more to that, but that can help understand thematic alignment with the work that someone in the community of practice might be doing. A short overview that helps to give kind of a high-level, top-level view of what this particular instrument or opportunity is addressing or best suited for. The detailed description from the grants.gov website, and some of these are quite dense, the range of eligible applicants, and there's an additional field farther to the right where for some that say others, it breaks that down in a bit more detail, so there's more clarity there. Potential relevance, so this is again one that Carla will talk a little bit more about. The agency that has posted this opportunity, the date of posting, the date of close, and then most importantly, a link to the posting on grants.gov. And each of these are hyperlinked. And so if you click this, it'll open up the listing on grants.gov, from which you can get more detailed information, as well as for many of them actually apply directly. And then where there was information on grants.gov, we did kind of an exercise of scraping the grants.gov website to pull in some of the key information that wasn't available just as a download. So where it was available, we have also total program fundings, the amount that the whole program is going to allocate, usually over some course of time. That is often included in the description. The award ceiling for each individual award, the award floor, a link to additional information beyond the grants.gov posting, the status, so whether this is an opportunity that has been posted that is live for application submissions, or whether it's forecasted and is not live yet. And so that those would be ones to just keep an eye on. And then, as I mentioned, additional information on eligibility and a unique opportunity code. So that is kind of the high-level overview of the database and little bit of guidance on how to use it. And looking ahead, we're going to release a new iteration in the coming weeks. So that will include relevant grant opportunities that were available as of November of this year with submission deadlines in January or later. So far, it's looking to be an even broader set of opportunities. So many more entries will be added here. It pulls from an even broader set of thematically aligned search terms, and it will include opportunities that are sponsored by some additional agencies, including agencies such as the State Department and the U.S. Agency for International Development, which focus on projects outside of the United States. We'll also include, therefore, filters related to geography. And then we'll pull in a couple more sources, including a deeper dive into the Inflation Reduction Act, largely leveraging the IRA Tracker, which is a resource managed by the Columbia Climate School. So everyone should stay tuned for that next release of the database. It'll happen within, if not before the end of this year, sometime in the new year, early in the new year. And I'll hand off now to Carla to talk about some of the most useful columns that I highlighted here, and also take a look at a few of these specific opportunities that might have relevance for folks in this community.
Awesome. Mia, would you mind
Oh yeah, happy to keep sharing.
so much. Hey everyone, my name is Carla. I am the intern. Awesome. Thank you so much, Mia. Yeah, so to begin, I'd like to talk about the relevance column. If you can scroll, yeah, please. Thank you so much. Yeah, potential relevance. So I began by filtering through the likely highly relevant, which I used criteria that was explicitly for environmental sustainability, regeneration, but that word wasn't actually explicitly used as much. Water resources, community-based programs, most highly aligned with BioFi work. Mostly, as I mentioned, explicitly environmental opportunities. And then for potentially relevant, for the potentially relevant, I used mostly high-level economic, like resiliency opportunities. Yes, thank you so much. And mostly also physical infrastructure support. Um, and then, yeah. And for bioregional interventions, I analyzed which keywords from the opportunity overview, which keywords fit into, for example, if I used ecosystem regeneration, then I looked for words that were explicitly for environmental regeneration, correct? For education and culture, I used more community-based programs aimed for resiliency that were mostly like civic engaged. And then for a few exciting opportunities, yes. I kind of noted that smart and connected communities incorporated like technologies for example, Web3, which the BioFi project has actually hosted a deep dive on in the past. Maybe I can link it after I'm done speaking. So smart and connected communities use, for example, Web3 technologies, which I think could be highly aligned with bioregions that are on this call, as well as fiscal year 2024 Atlantic Salmon Habitat Restoration Partnership grants. We at the BioFi project have also been working or thinking about, right, ecosystem regeneration, but also salmon restoration and really wildlife restoration in general.
And then for the fiscal year 24 bipartisan infrastructure law, coastal zone management, habitat protection, as mentioned by Mia, this utilizes a lot of the IRA funding. So, which hopefully that in the version 2 of this database, we will use the most, or at least we will incorporate more of the IRA. And yeah, we hope to give more details as they come. And yeah, thank you so much.
This is incredible. Thank you, Carla and Mia, for walking us through this. And yeah, it's only iteration one. There's a part two coming soon, but yeah, I'm particularly excited about all of the knowledge that is here about serious money that bioregions can be applying to immediately and bringing into their communities. And yeah, the work that we're doing is certainly aligned with a lot of federal objectives, and there's federal money for that. And I think often as, real scrappy grassroots activist communities, we forget that there is federal funding that needs communities to implement it. So yeah, thank you, Mia and Carla. I'm very excited to have this first version out, and excited to share the second iteration once we add in some more of these details. And I wonder if before we go to Josie and then Aria, you two want to say anything about general trends that you saw in kind of some of the themes or areas that were coming up again and again in these grants that you were looking at. Mhm. Mia and Carla, you have any thoughts on that? Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think I'm looking forward to hearing from Josie and Aria on this particular point because I think they'll have a lot of perspective to add there. Um, but I do think that one of obviously anything that is within the realm of energy, environment, um, heard we've all heard about anticipated shifts with regard to policy in those regions. I think, or in those areas, um, I think things that are at the intersection of supporting rural communities, supporting agriculture, and regenerative work are much less under threat. And and so yeah, so we'll have to see how things evolve, but those are some of the my headline instincts around that.
Awesome.
Carla, yeah.
Carly, have anything you want to add?
Not at the moment. Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing what Josie and Aria are saying. Right, let's say.
Cool. And we'll open for Q&A after we hear from Josie and Aria. So folks just hold their questions till the end and we can have a group discussion. So now we're going to hear just for a few minutes from our friend Josie Watson from Mycelial Law. She's an amazing legal and environmental policy scholar, bioregional weaver, and she's been looking at the federal grant space to support community-led regeneration for a while. So Josie, over to you to share what you're sensing and what you think this community needs to be aware of.
Yeah, this is such an exciting call. Maybe thumbs up if you can hear me okay. Okay, good. My mic is working. Okay. So yeah, I just incredible work with this particular, storytelling and curation of the grants available during these times. It definitely is really exciting to envision the BioFi community getting really engaged with its particular moment of collective storytelling, like Sam is saying, and to act on these grants, quick over the next 6-month time horizon. just given that the really exciting grant pools that we're currently working with are from the IRA, and you have expressed interest by Trump's team already of repealing as much funding as they can from the IRA really quickly. Yeah, that being said, my background over the last few years has involved weaving with the Conservation Finance Network, which is based out of the Yale Center for Business and Environment. And we did a lot of thinking about the Colombian Environmental Defense Fund IRA tracker and their particular brand of sensing for potential overlap and synergy between grants, and then just the basic administering of advice to project networks that wanted to perhaps establish partnerships. We've had huge increases in partnerships between tribes and nonprofits and rural businesses to make the most of some of the USDA and RCPP, EPA, EJ grants that came out under Biden. And just all of those protocols are just, they're a lot out there circulating, and a lot of good case studies that were generated over the last few years, a lot of good lessons learned. And just regardless of what's going to happen throughout the Trump administration, practicing being a community that understands how storytelling translates into functional partnerships between the stakeholders that can apply for federal grants together, and in applying in partnership can unlock much larger pools of grant finance, is just a fantastic practice for us all to be engaging in over the next few years. I'm excited that we get to go back and forth with ARIA, because we probably have, lenses on which grant pools remain really exciting, even given, Trump's considerations of Lee Zeldin for the EPA, not looking good. Chris Wright for the Department of Energy, not looking good. But Brooke Rollins for USDA, more of a gray area. I think we'll probably see that the rural development grants are going to be really safe. A lot of RCPP grants will be safe, which is incredibly exciting, because again, like RCPP, the Conservation Stewardship Program, these are grant spaces that BioFi community members that are in alignment with the stories they're telling about how they'd like to evolve, right? Their land use practices and their network and their market building. These are development objectives that are in total alignment with RCPP, and it's really exciting that we'll get to continue to attend to that. Yeah, my legal practice, my cilial law, is cultivating a specialty in what I'm calling this, ancient new sovereignties space of how can the watersheds cultivate sovereignties when they're interacting with state and federal governments. It's much easier to be working in and of well-resourced place-based networks when the states are turned to as the first collaborators, because the relationships built within the agencies at the state level, they're really, really powerful when project networks have good relationality with the agency members in the Department of Agriculture and Department of Natural Resources. And those relationships, I don't think, are to be underestimated in their potential power. And just keeping in mind that we have the opportunity to build blended finance holding containers and strategize together about how project networks can come together and build holding containers for federal grant finance within the same ecosystem as a financial holding container for philanthropic grants, and just create like what my cilial law, I'm thinking into as just buffer pools that grow in strength over time. And some groups might even consider building revolving loan funds that are financed by federal grants, and just keeping those capitalized to create buffers and resilience over time. And then, another thing I wanted to touch on, like, especially since storytelling was brought up by Sam, is that I feel there's a lot of interoperability with the US Climate Alliance, which is the coalition of governors that formed during the first Trump administration. And they launched the hashtag We Are Still In movement when Trump first pulled us out of the UNFCCC. And our Governor Mills in Maine was one of the first leaders of that coalition and has been very active in tending to this movement of generating increased state capacity for climate resilience action. And she has kept tending to that fire even under Biden. In 2021, I think she is when she announced the Community Resilience Partnership for the state of Maine. She's doing a lot of work compiling all aligned climate resilience grants into pools and facilitating gatherings of aligned project networks. So yeah, just keep in mind that the state-led regional climate alliance movement is kin with this emerging bioregional movement. If we're looking for allies that have a deep, intimate understanding of grant ecosystems, see who's playing around in the climate alliance and maybe reach out to them for advice and consultation. The other piece I wanted to make sure to touch on is this concept of the Green Resilient Hub as a fantastic case study that we saw in the Biden years of our climate resilience, again, our BioFi kin that are just in the regional watershed climate resilience strategy space, financing strategy space came up with as a methodology of, like I'm saying, pooling grants from the USDA, like the Rural Energy for America program and Regional Conservation Partnership program and FEMA, the Building Resilient Infrastructure in Communities grants in a pool that then there was simultaneously a pool created that reached out to the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, Walton Family Foundation, CRESAGE, and they started to build matching grant pools with philanthropic partners. So this concept of the Green Resilience Hub, I think, remains pretty relevant over the coming years as just like an infrastructure for, even if you've identified the grants you'd like to go for, how do you go for them and how do you build out your capacity to receive them and really make an impact with them. Yeah, I feel like I almost want to pause and move to hear from you, Ari, about which grants are still feasible to be playing with here.
Thank you, Josie. Such great information there. And yeah, such a good reminder. And I get this question all the time about how do bioregional organizing teams interact with existing authorities? And I love this reminder from you about the role of states that are already working on assessing which of these grants are relevant for community-led initiatives and where can bioregional organizing teams work with state and local government to apply for some of those grants and pool them into a bioregional financing facility or maybe a financing facility that already exists, but is aligned with bioregional objectives. So thank you, Josie. Thank you for all of that. Now over to Arya McLaughlin, who is the executive director and one of the co-founders of an amazing nonprofit called LandCore that is focused on soil regeneration. And they have been following the federal grant space, federal funding space for soil regeneration activities for years now, and regularly go up to the Hill to engage in lobbying and do the whole thing. So over to you, Arya, to share what you're sensing in this weird moment that we find ourselves in.
Well, thank you. Hi, everyone. It's good to be here with you. And yeah, congrats again on a amazing resource. And yeah, I think, as Sam said, a big part of our work is sort of a vehicle for change, and sort of a lever that we can't ignore is federal policy. You know, I think particularly with agriculture, we talk about so much of what we grow and how we grow it is determined by federal policy. And so even with all of the incredible actions that take place, whether it's at the state or city level or with big corporations, that policy is ultimately something that we want to get involved in. And I think just in general, literacy in federal policy, literacy in federal grants, like being unafraid to get involved in or throw your hat in the ring for a federal grant or to partner, as Josie was saying so well, to increase your chances of making a really strong case for federal funding. All of that is a plus one. let's see. I think so much of the question of what is going to happen is really just it depends, and we don't deeply know yet. I think especially at the level of individual programs. So I think a lot of this will be monitoring closely. I think I heard some of you say act quickly in terms of any sort of funding cycles that are approaching, especially in the next like 6 to 12 months. I will say that I'm not particularly concerned about any funding that has already been awarded for those folks who are already in process. I think that that's basically fine. I think there's a question about remaining funds that have been appropriated but not yet awarded to individual entities. That is a little bit more of a question about those being reallocated or maybe not necessarily cut, but potentially reappropriated. So that's something that we're keeping an eye on. Let's see, regarding specific government agencies, again, hard to say for sure, but with the historical context of the previous Trump administration, I think that we've seen that the previous administration did propose cuts to science-related agencies. So, for example, the National Science Foundation, which is one of the agencies on here, and then environmental related agencies like the Department of Interior and the Bureau of Land Management, the agency within DOI that we think about a lot. I think, of course, the EPA would also be something that we would expect to see some general cuts. Now, whether that comes to things like staffing versus individual grant programs is also something that we don't yet know. I think on the other side of that, I noticed that there was a grant in there from the Department of Defense. There are a bunch from the Department of Commerce. I would imagine that those are likely to be a little bit safer, or at least less likely to come up immediately. And then I think the Department of Agriculture also, it's a little bit mixed. I guess I'll speak to that in a little bit more detail. Just as it's an area of focus. So in addition to the every 5 year or approximately every 5 year farm bill process, which is where most of the food and ag policy in this country comes from, we also have the annual appropriations bill. I think for context, the agriculture community and even like the ag research community, and I can see some of those grants in this database, that community has sort of seen modest gains year over year and considered that a win. And I would imagine over the next 5 years that if the community is able to just hold the funding lines to maintain rather than getting a cut, that would be considered a win over the next 5 years. So I think that that's something that we might expect over agriculture, that we're not getting huge increases in funding to kind of like meet the scale of the moment potentially, but if we can kind of just hold on and that either like departments and agencies that we that we think are important, as well as the individual grants, if those funding levels can be maintained, I would imagine that many will view that as a success. Specifically regarding agriculture, we just had some additional good news on the House and Senate Ag Committee. We have two female Democrats who will be on the ranking member of both House and Senate Ag Committee, and both are, I think, quite strong champions for regeneration, for soil health, for conservation, and just frankly for agriculture in general. I would also say that ag is kind of a lower priority, like a lower in the sort of presidential priorities in terms of like election and campaign promises. It's really quite low down there, which is a problem in terms of getting a farm bill passed, but maybe not such a bad thing in terms of evading, potential larger sort of changes to the overall structure. So I thought that was something that might be worth mentioning. And then I would also just echo what Mia was saying about tracking Inflation Reduction Act funds. I think that some of the climate and environmental funds, certainly that was a political and campaign promise to revoke or cut some of that funding. That said, many of those projects relate to clean energy or built infrastructure or even natural infrastructure projects in rural communities, in states and areas where there are Republican constituents. And so I think it is going to be sort of easier said than done when you have folks who are just really, really invested in the funds and the grants that have already started to go out. I think it also kind of speaks to the importance of being in touch with your representatives if you're here in the US, and say how much those projects mean to you. And if you have your eye on a particular grant, let your representative know that that grant program and that agency is important to you. It's really helpful for them to hear from you directly on all of that. I might pause there, but I'm happy to get into questions and comments from everyone.
One clarifying question, this is super helpful, Arya, on the farm bill. So are we in a period where we don't have a farm bill and we're waiting for a new farm bill? I forget the technical term for this.
Correct. Yeah, so the Farm Bill, as I mentioned, is supposed to pass approximately every 5 years. But what was supposed to be a 2023 Farm Bill was delayed in 2023, and then we've just sort of officially had our hopes dashed as of the end of this year, with only a week left in Congress. So even just at this stage, trying to get an extension on the current Farm Bill, which is the 2018 Farm Bill, even just getting an extension on that. And then there's some conversation in the news the past couple of weeks about farmers and land stewards also receiving disaster aid relief. And work to try and make sure that smaller and more sort of diversified producers and land stewards are able to access those funds. But I think, as we'll see, just appropriations in general will probably be a little bit of a political challenge. So unfortunately, we're not there yet with getting a farm bill passed.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so much amazing knowledge here. I think we probably open it up. Tyler, you want to facilitate some Q&A for us?
Let's do it. Yeah, I imagine there's some broad questions, but also very specific questions to maybe even specific grants that people are looking at. So I just invite folks to put in the chat or raise your hand. Anything from Mia, Arya, Carla, Josie, Samantha, or just open questions you think that the wisdom gathered on this call might be able to tend to well. So I'll give y'all a second. I'm in no rush. And I think while we're waiting, I'll just make a request that if you do see yourself engaging more deeply with this database and even applying for some of these grants, or learn something about partners, colleagues that have access any of these, we'd really love you to share outwards with the community of practice so that others can be learning from your experience and kind of building a bit of a collective strategic intelligence here. And so I'll post in the chat here a place where you can do that within the BioFi community of practice, where people have already started to exchange ideas. But let's see. I see Glenn has a comment. Okay, so Marcus, you were asking just about this in the chat. Yeah, let me grab this link for us. And I think the best way for now is just to add comments on that post. I see Evan has a question for anyone who wants to take it. Do any grant opportunities for organizations focused on soil health come to mind?
I guess that's for me. Let's see. Yes, Evan, there are a bunch, depending on the sort of the scale that you're looking at. Within the USDA and then the Natural Resources Conservation Service, NRCS, there's a handful of grants that primarily go to producers, to farmers or ranchers, but are also just available to private land stewards in general, and that includes things like wildfire mitigation here in the West. So grants like EQIP, the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, the Conservation Stewardship Program. It was Josie Amir who mentioned the Regional Conservation Partnership Program, Conservation Innovation Grants. Those last two require a private matching grant. And so I would say also in general that programs where there is private investment, not just pure federal funds, probably also have a better chance of sustaining over the next several years. So that's something also that I would look into, both as a way to emphasize the importance of partnerships, but also I think there's just a way that federal providers are happy to have that investment. And just sort of kind of speaks to conservative ideals to leverage private investment. So that's something to look out for. And then, yeah, all of those NRCS programs that I just mentioned got a big injection of funds from the Inflation Reduction Act, and how much of that continues in the coming years is a little bit of a question, but there's still a decent baseline there that has bipartisan support, which is great.
And just to build on one of the things that Arya just mentioned, I know our colleagues at the Open Future Coalition, and we have Sushant on the line here, have been working on accounting for the value of resources that organizations like the Open Future Coalition or LandCorp or the BioFi Project or Mycelial Law are providing to these bioregional organizing teams, and putting a dollar value on that. So it's seen as a private resource that's being allocated to a project, and then that private funding can be used to leverage more public funding. So just like seeing the value of all these capitals that might not have a dollar value attached to it initially. Tyler, back over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Will, I see your hand. I want to get to a couple comments in the chat first before you, but I think there's a really quick question from Marcus. Does the database indicate if there's matching funds as part of any of these grants?
Matching funds, maybe is this matching funds for like
I'll give an
public-private
example.
partnership, or like, yeah, what
I'll give
do
an
you mean by
example.
that?
You want to apply for a fund, and they say they'll fund 10,000 or 100,000, but they require 30% match funds from your own funds. Do you indicate that do you have that? Does that exist?
Interesting.
In the EU, a lot of funds are like that. A lot of the European Union funds
A
require you to match
requirement
funds with
for
20%,
matching
30%.
funds. Yeah, maybe we can explore adding a column on that in the next database, and what the requirements even around those matching funds might be.
There's sort of clever ways you can get around it. Sometimes you can use regional funds, kind of national funds. Sometimes you can use, in the States, it might be state funds matched with regional funds, or it can be sweat equity, or sometimes there are
Yeah,
other outputs you can use as well. So
that's right, Marcus. Sometimes just anything that's a non-federal fund can count. So it can be state government, it can be in-kind contributions. Absolutely.
Brilliant. Thanks for bringing that, Marcus. We'll go to Howard, your question, and then probably over to Will. Howard asked about if any of these federal grants seem to be focused on supporting community level and bioregional biochar supply chains, including workforce training. Is that something any of y'all have seen?
Nothing specifically from the iteration that is in this database right now. On biochar, to my recollection, what we can keep an eye out in this next iteration as we're looking through specifically. I think that actually is maybe a good search term to add to the thematic search, given the specificity there. So, yeah.
It may show up as hazardous wildfire fuel reduction. It may be on that end, looking upstream to preventing wildfires, particularly in the West. But yeah, I'd appreciate highlighting anything that does emerge.
Yeah, and Howard, of course, you know that some states have state level programs for that. I think California has one. But we'll take a look at the federal level as well.
Thanks for that. Will, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I guess it's kind of a weird question, but we've seen these like hydrogen hub plays that are coming together. And so they accompany renewable fields. So you've got like they're under the infrastructure, under the IRA, these hydrogen hubs are heavily subsidized if they power off like 85% or more off of renewable energy. And so they're like a value add that accompanies wind or solar fields. But there's a great deal of groundwater mining involved to convert into hydrogen. And I'm asking, are those going to be funded, or is that going to be stopped in a few months is a question. So like it's one of those things that's like good, but it's not good locally, or it's not good for the aquifer. And I'm wondering how serious of a threat it is, because I've kind of just like been telling myself it's not going to really happen because the new administration. So think about that for a second. And if anybody does have an answer, I would love to hear it. And then a comment is the USDA NRCS has a lot, like the equip was mentioned for sure. Like absolutely, we've had a lot of success, like getting help. It's not like it's not the help that we want. Like I mean, it's frustrating, but you should absolutely go and talk to your USDA NRCS like rep. Like that's number one thing you should do is go talk to your USDA NRCS person. So thank you.
Thanks, Will. Yeah. Any ideas on that hydrogen conversation? Yeah.
Yeah, so I know that so the IRA has green hydrogen tax credits are one of the mechanisms included in the IRA. And I think with the general shift or kind of what has been stated around the support for renewable energy sources and kind of dwindling in the Trump administration, and then kind of a commitment to fossil fuel, the fossil fuel industry. I think the general perspective is like a shift, potentially reduction of incentive or a threat to incentives for green hydrogen, and maybe more so for traditional steam methane reformation hydrogen. And so I'm not sure kind of like it's kind of like support for maybe green or less support for green hydrogen, maybe more support for hydrogen um, coming from fossil based hydrogen essentially, but I think to be determined in terms of how that impacts actual pipeline infrastructure or kind of initiatives around that. But yeah, I think hydrogen, I very controversial, obviously, and yeah, in terms of that and leakage concerns, all kinds of things. So.
Thanks, Mia. Josie or Arya, anything on this before we go to Marcus?
Well, it just sounds like in this particular issue, it's probably a good thing that Trump would roll back grants, because this sounds like an area of renewable development that communities haven't quite figured out whether or not they support it or want it. So,
Marcus.
Thank you. I think that was a really good comment, Will, that we should develop those relationships with the people who are administering the grants. So Karen, she's posted in the chat, I think we want more people like that, because when you have that dialogue, sometimes new grants come, the grant officer may say, well, this grant doesn't work, but I know of this one that's coming along in 3 months' time, or we just couldn't find anyone for this grant. Unless we have a community, we can help find those people. And the grant officers, if they get the good response, they'll use us more. So that's got to be a good collaboration. So I think that's something else I think we should put in the, maybe not the database, but somewhere we should have some idea about who's working well with people. Yeah, thanks for that.
Hugely important.
Yeah.
Yeah, the relational flows of information here through these bureaucracies, it can be so efficient. Sorry, I cut you off, Arya.
No, I was just going to reiterate what both of you are saying. I don't think it's a great answer to what you're saying, Karen, except that what Marcus is saying is really true, that so many of how the federal programs and grants are interpreted, administrated, what projects and practices are prioritized, that is interpreted and determined at the state and county level. And so building relationships with I mean, maybe it's a loftier goal, but building a relationship with your state NRCS conservationist, but also heads of county at NRCS can help to educate them and bring them along if they're not as sort of up with regenerative practices more broadly. And then, I think that that's true of getting involved at community and county level government too. Like just so much of water and fire and land management policy, forest policy is determined and executed at the county level. So just get in there, otherwise other folks will.
Thank you. Well, I am going to bring us to a close, friends. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Mia, for all the hard work. Thank you, Carla, for all the hard work. And thank you, Josie and Arya, for hopping on kind of on short notice and just brainstorming really quickly to serve this whole ecosystem that's building here. Before we hop off, I just want to share about a couple events that are coming up, including tomorrow. So I just sent a big post of links in the chat. Tomorrow we have what we call our field building call. This is a chance to really hear about how people are organizing in place to do bioregional regeneration at scale and how they're thinking about financing this work and building BFFs. And so tomorrow we get to hear from two amazing organizations in the Argentinian Andes. And at the same time, Samantha, you're going to be chatting at kind of a roundtable conversation. Do you just want to give a quick snapshot of what that is?
Yeah, it's an event called the Moral Economy Summit that's hosted by the Garrison Institute. And this is the second iteration of this conversation. There was an in-person version in New York in September, and it was really rich. It was one of the most interesting conversations I've been a part of in this space around regenerative economics, bioregional economics. There's a woman that's going to be speaking from the Reparations Finance Lab who Tyler and I have been talking to about weaving together with bioregional organizing teams. John Fullerton will be there speaking about regenerative economics. The folks from TransCap will be speaking about systemic investing. And yeah, it should be a fun event, and it lasts longer than the field building calls, so you can kind of pop in before or after.
Cool. Thank you for that, Samantha. Um, I just put the link to the Hilo in the chat. And I saw a question early about, are we going to be working on databases for other regions outside of the US? And I think the desire on our end is a full yes, and it just comes down to capacity and networked intelligence. And so if you feel like you're in a position in another country, or even continent to support us in doing that work, we'd love to talk. Because we've got limited capacity and limited relationships in those places compared to the amazing folks we have on this call. So please reach out.
I will just say that,
Go ahead, Mia.
that we're planning to include at least federal funding for bioregional work in other regions. So US federal funding from the US Aid Department and State Department. TBD on relevance. We're filtering through those right now, but that kind of is obviously different from regionally supported work, but potentially kind of a bridge between those two. So that should be in the next iteration.
Awesome. Thank you, Mia. Yeah, the other thing I was going to share is we've been talking to Josie about forming more academic partnerships with universities that want to do research in this space. Josie is working very closely with the Yale Center for Environment, and they run their own grants databases. So where can we find an academic partner in a bioregion where there's really active bioregional organizing, and partner with them to develop a database like this, and work with some college students or master's students. So if you have a proposal on that front, we would love to explore collaboration there.
Wonderful. Well, please get off of mute and say goodbye. It's nice to hear voices. Thank you all.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks
Bye.
again for the
Thanks,
great
everyone.
tool, everybody.